About this time of year, it's going to start becoming very obvious if you have not adequately thinned the things that need to be thinned. Why do you thin things, and how do you thin things? I have some spinach going to seed, and down here I have some cucumbers. I need to thin those. Things that you grow from, that you plant straight from pots, like those peppers that you can see there, or even the gladiolas behind there that are kind of like sets. They're bulbs, so you plant them right in the spacing that they're desired. Those kinds of things you generally shouldn't need to thin unless you overplanted and discovered too late. These are ANCHO peppers. Look at that beautiful one right there growing. These violas here I planted from seed, and they seemed so far apart when I first planted them, but now they have filled in nicely. So again, don't overplant things when you're planting them from pots and then end up thinning out good plants, because they will fill in sooner or later if you follow the guidelines. These are some dry bush beans, and those are also some things that you should not need to thin. You're supposed to plant those seeds every 2 to 3 inches, and then they grow up and do fine at that spacing. Something like cabbages, you generally, even though you're supposed to plant them a little more thickly, you need to get to thinning out in between, or else they won't have room to really grow. Over and over again, I discover that when I thin to the appropriate distance, plants just grow by leaps and bounds when they have the space to do it. So you cannot just decide to thin, when they get to a certain size, because if they are too close together, a lot of times they won't grow past that size. Here I have some corn that I thinned the same time as I thinned that cabbage, and again, it was probably just this tall when I thinned it a couple of weeks ago, and they weren't even that close together. They were spaced about 4 inches, which is what I planted them at the time. But as soon as I thinned them, they started to take off in growth. You can see I've planted some watermelon down here among the corn, and I've already thinned those to 2 per spot, even though there were 3 or 4 planted in each spot. I picked the best looking plants and ones that were reasonably spaced to leave for now. I may get down to where I just thin those to 1, we'll see. The same thing with the zucchini that's over here. Okay, these were onions that I grew from seed in the greenhouse and planted them exactly where I wanted them, so I don't have to thin them. Back here are some bell peppers that were planted from pots, so they don't need to be thinned because they were spaced exactly how I wanted them to grow. And then behind you can see some purple bush beans that are growing back there that will not need to be thinned. So there was not a lot of thinning to do in this raised bed. You can see my garlic, which I planted in the fall here at the certain spacing. Those are growing huge. And then in the middle, I have some Brussels sprouts that I planted from little pots, and those are all spaced appropriately. Since the garlic grows up very, very straight, it doesn't take up a lot of, it can be planted closer to the Brussels sprouts there. And then over on this side are peas, which again, just plant and leave. You don't have to thin them. And they are about done for the season. It's the end of June, so they've about stopped producing. So I'll be able to pull those out, and that will give the Brussels sprouts more room on this side. Lettuce is something that is hard to plant spaced unless you're very, very patient with the little seeds, and I try to spread them out, but I also keep in mind that you can thin them as you eat them. Since you're eating the greens, it makes it a little easier to take advantage of that. We ate a fair amount and it filled in as I thinned it out, but this will be pulled and given to the chickens pretty soon because in the heat it's starting to bolt, and that will give more room to the tomatoes, which were spaced when I planted them because I planted them from pots. Pole beans are like bush beans that you do not have to thin them. I let some of these moss rows go to seed here, and I might need to pull those. Carrots are something that are hard to thin if you get them too close because they really don't like their roots disturbed. Potatoes are something that don't generally need to be thinned because you place the potato starts in spacing along as you go along, so they just grow and fill in and grow all kinds of potatoes under the ground. When I planted these from seed and then they sprouted up just in one row, and then I thinned them to be about 18 inches apart, which is pretty standard, and I've grown this variety for years. It's Arcadia. And then I couldn't stand to get rid of all of them, so I put some of the, this is the row, 18 inches, so then I did one kind of 18 inches back here. I'm either going to be giving away or freezing a lot of broccoli. This is a lot of broccoli. I should have thinned, hi kitty, I should have thinned these beets a little bit, although I did try to keep them somewhat spaced. So I don't know if you can see in there, they're not doing too bad with growing down in there, but my husband really likes these, so maybe I can talk him into helping me thin them. So that's about it. I hope that gives you an idea of why and how to thin some of these things to actually get a better crop and be more satisfied with your produce. And if you want to read more specifics, please go to dailyimprovisations.com.